Hey guys, I'm Dave and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today we're going to make a new push stick with an adjustable foot. I've used a lot of push sticks over the years. Some I liked, some were okay, some I hated. I finally decided it was time to make one that I like, that's comfortable, and I'll use all the time. Let's see how that came together. These are my current push sticks. I most often grab the small style that I've been using for decades. I originally got this design out of a Delta Unisaw owner's manual. This larger version I made a few years ago, and I got the design from Jay Bates, and I'll link that video below. The problem is neither design feels quite right to me anymore. The small style feels like the angle is too low and a little awkward. The large version is good with long stock, but not great on short stock. Another issue I have with this style is the replaceable stop on the back, as mine tends to pivot and catch on the fence once in a while. I just want to quickly mention the push stick that came with the saw. I'm not sure what the engineers were thinking, but this is way too long, and unless you like working a mile away from your saw. Okay, maybe it's only 18 inches long, but it's way too long for me. Mine probably went into the trash on day one. Before getting into the real build, I'm going to take my old worn-out small push stick and change the angle to see if that's more comfortable. I clamped it to the fence at a higher angle and transferred the vertical line onto the body. Then I could mark the face that needed to be trimmed off and a horizontal line to complete the push stick angle. I used my jigsaw to cut the lines I had just drawn. Now these don't need to be perfect, just close enough. I cleaned up any roughness on the edges with a little sandpaper and took it for a test run. I used a lot of half-inch plywood, so my push sticks should be able to handle that. The heel on this guy was just a bit too low and caught on the table as I pushed the stock forward. Just a few moments with the random orbit sander and the heel now cleared the tabletop when pushing half-inch plywood. Time will tell if I prefer this new angle over the old one. I like having full-width push sticks and at least one for ripping thin stock. And when a push stick gets too worn, I either recut the foot or make a new one. But what if I use a different design altogether? I started with some scrap strips of half-inch Baltic birch plywood that were just over 5 inches wide. I took them over to the miter saw and cut them a little longer than 9 inches. I like a more substantial grip on my push sticks, so I glued up 2 of the pieces so my push sticks would be about 1 inch thick. I'm making 2 push sticks, so I just glued and clamped them together at the same time. Once the glue had time to dry, I pulled the blanks out of the clamps and cleaned off the excess glue on one edge. At the table saw, I ran that cleaned edge against the fence and ripped the blanks to 5 1/8 inch wide. I readjusted the fence to 5 inches and cut the opposite edge. Then I took the blanks to the miter saw and cut one end square, flipped the pieces around and cut them to 9 inches long. I made a template from scrap plywood since I'm making more than one push stick. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of cutting it out. I started with a 1 3/8 inch Forstner bit for the front of the handhold. Then I cut out the rest of the profile with my jigsaw and sanded the shape smooth using a drum sander on my drill press. If you'd like to build one of these push sticks for yourself, I'll add a link to my website for a free set of dimension drawings. With my pattern cleaned up, I could transfer the shapes to my blanks, including the 2 lines that locate the holes on the back end of the push stick. At the drill press, I set up my fence so that the 3/8 inch brad point bit would be centered on the end of the push stick. Then I drilled the 2 holes about 3/4 of an inch deep. The drill press fence helps hold the blanks square to the table, but these holes could also be drilled by hand. Now I could use my jigsaw to cut the blanks close to the lines I'd drawn from the patterns. I stayed about a 1/16 of an inch on the waist side of the line and included the roundovers on the corners and the handle. I set my table router up with a flush trim bit and used double stick tape to connect the pattern to the blank. I made sure to keep the square edges of the pattern and the blank lined up as close as possible. Now I could use the router to clean up the rough edges left by the jigsaw, giving me a perfect copy of the pattern. After prying the pattern off the blank, I switched my router over to a 1/4 inch roundover bit, and I used all the edges of the push stick that I might be handling. With that done, I cleaned up the push stick using my random orbit sander and some 150 grit paper. This cleans up any residual glue from the tape, any rough edges from the machining, and I also cleaned up the roundovers I could reach with my sander, and what I couldn't reach, I cleaned up with a bit of hand sanding. Back at the table saw, I ripped down a strip of scrap stock, in this case some leftover 3/4 inch pine, although you can use whatever stock you've got kicking around. I cut it to just over 1 inch wide so I could plane it down to match the thickness of my push sticks. A couple of passes through my planer and the pine was the thickness I was looking for. Or about a 32nd thinner than the push stick itself. I marked the center of the pine and used a V-groove bit in my router to help me align the fence so that the center of the bit was in line with the center of the stock. Then I swapped out the V-groove for a 3/8 inch straight cutter for my first pass. I wanted a 1/4 inch deep groove, and rather than hog out all that stock at once, I took 2 passes, removing about half the stock with each pass. Oh, and despite my efforts to center the groove, one side is almost a 1/16 of an inch thicker than the other side, although I'm still not sure why. I marked the face that was away from the fence, and then cut the pine into several 2.5 inch long pieces at my miter saw. I'm making 2 push sticks, but something like 8 rear blocks. These will wear out, and rather than remake them one at a time, I'll have enough spares to last me for a good while. I swapped out the 3/8 inch straight bit in my router table with a 1/4 inch spiral bit. Now the spiral isn't super important, it's just the best 1/4 inch bit I've got. Then I could set up a start and stop block on my fence to route a through groove. Again, taking multiple passes to complete the cut. Just be careful when you're working with small pieces like this so close to a cutter, especially on that final cut when the bit will be exposed. Just take your time and pay attention. In my case, I also had to make sure that I kept the outside face in place to keep the 2 grooves centered on each other. Now I don't like metal fasteners too close to my blades, so the bottom hole gets a 3/8 inch dowel glued and tapped into place. Just make sure to wipe off the excess glue or the rear block won't seat correctly. These pins are too long, and I need to cut them down. The grooves in the rear blocks are 1/4 of an inch deep, and you don't want the dowel to bottom out and get in the way. So I cut them down so only 3/16 of an inch protrude from the back of the push stick. You can do this with a handsaw or a miter saw. Just make sure you ease the edges afterwards with a little sandpaper. I chucked up a 1/2 inch countersink in my cordless drill and eased the top hole. This step could have been done at the drill press, but I forgot. This countersink allows the threaded insert to be fully seated, flush to or slightly below the surface. I chose to use a 1/4-20 insert because that left plenty of stock on either side of the insert, and I was sure that I had a couple of knobs in my stash that would work here, which I didn't. The next step was to set the insert. I used an Allen wrench and threaded it down again until the face of the insert was flush or just below the surface of the push stick. Not wanting to run to the store to find some knobs, I used a 1/4-20 bolt and a washer to complete the assembly. Set the rear block over the protruding dowel, then insert the bolt into the threaded insert. This 2-point connection allows you to adjust the height of the rear block from flush with the bottom of the push stick to about 5/8 of an inch below the bottom. It also prevents the block from pivoting where it could catch on the fence while in use. My mismeasurement while routing the blocks offset it about 1/16 of an inch from the inside edge, so catching the fence will not be a problem. Let's just call that a happy accident. I just had to take it for a test spin. I like the solid feel of the inch-wide block in my hands, and I also like the compact length of this design.
This is a quick and easy project to keep me working safely in the shop. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like to work with things that are uncomfortable or feel awkward. But I also need something to keep me safe while working on the table saw with small stock. This simple push stick with its adjustable foot should be my go-to push stick for the foreseeable future. And while I still haven't found a threaded knob that'll work on this, I did find a thumb screw. And the nice thing about that is it's small enough that it won't catch on the fence while I'm using it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Was there something I could have done differently, easier, smarter, safer? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe share it with friends and give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button and little bell so you get notified each time I put out a new video. I've got kind of an interesting build video coming up if I can ever get it through the project. But stay tuned for that. Guys, have a great day. We'll see you soon. Take care.